Welcome back. After the Bank of Canada governor called Canada's economy atrocious last week, the finance minister finally announced the budget date. He said the April 21st budget will be balanced, but don't expect a lot of stimulus spending.
We do not, however, need the kind of stimulus budget that we had during the Great Recession, because we're not in a recession now.
So for more on the budget, I'm joined by Industry Minister James Moore from Vancouver. So, Mr. Moore, I know you've spent a lot of the money already on tax cuts. So how much of this budget will be chock full of election promises for the future, and how much will deal with the very serious economic troubles facing the country?
Well, look, this is as you sort of, I would put it a little differently. This is a very important budget for the country. We have a balanced budget after a great deal of fiscal prudence, led, of course, by the Prime Minister and Jim Flaherty, now being delivered by Joe Oliver. We have tax relief for Canadian families. We think budget surpluses are, by definition, are overtaxation. We want to return that money back to Canadian families. But because we are in a good fiscal situation overall, as a government, we do now reserve some flexibility to return some tax relief back to families, or to have some focused spending in key areas of the Canadian economy that will make sure that we have prolonged growth over the long term. So it's been sound fiscal management that has given us this flexibility and put us in a spot to deliver a budget on the 21st that will well serve the Canadian economy.
Well, your government is spending, I think, $7.5 million to advertise the budget just before the election, and using the same colors as the Tory party in their ads. This seems kind of brazen. Why doesn't the government do what the Ontario government does and have the Auditor General decide what ads are appropriate?
Well, look, we think these ads are really important to make sure that Canadians know, frankly, the benefits that are offered by the Government of Canada and the tax relief that's offered by the Government of Canada. We have programs like the Tax-Free Savings Account. We have amateur sport tax credits for kids, book tax credits for students. We want to make sure that Canadians take full measure of all these programs and take them into account when they're moving forward with their own personal financial picture. So I think it's an important part of the Government of Canada to communicate to Canadians what it is that we're doing. I don't think that, frankly, they are partisan. I think that they're an important aspect of government communication, so Canadians can get a full sense of what's available to them through the Government of Canada.
Now, the Bank of Canada governor says the economy is atrocious because of falling oil prices. What are you going to do about it?
Well, the economy is challenged, and of course, you actually have to break it down sector by sector. We are challenged, but I think it's quite clear that the most important thing that we can do as a government is to keep our fiscal house in order, to give the Government of Canada the flexibility that we need to react effectively with public policy, if it's through tax relief or focused spending measures that will boost the Canadian economy in certain parts of the country. For example, in the manufacturing sector, the province of Ontario, 1 in 3 Canadians lives in the province of Ontario, but Ontario is more than 40% of the Canadian economy. In the manufacturing sector, there has been struggling, so I think you can look for some measures in the budget that will speak to manufacturing, that will certainly support that sector, so that we can have some long-term prosperity and growth in that part of the economy.
Well, what about infrastructure? The mayors in the provinces are saying, got to do more, you got to spend more money, and that helps create jobs.
Yeah. Well, look, we passed in last year's budget, not this year's budget, last year's budget, the largest infrastructure program in Canada's history, and a lot of that money is being managed by the provinces. But of course, we want to invest in infrastructure, and we've announced key projects all across the country. We'll continue to do so, and this budget will reaffirm our commitment to infrastructure spending. I mean, there has been a gap, I think, for a long time between what provinces and the federal government need to do on infrastructure, and we've stepped up with our Building Canada program, which is something that we worked with the Canadian Federation of Municipalities on to deliver record investment into infrastructure. And I think you're going to see some very large-scale announcements in every part of the country to the benefit of productivity, to the benefit of infrastructure, and to the benefit of the quality of life of everyday Canadians.
Now, the parliamentary budget officer and other critics say that the income splitting measure, tax measure, the child care benefit allowance that you've announced, all of these are measures that tend to help wealthier Canadians and not sort of the Tim Horton crowd that used to always sort of look after. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, I don't think, frankly, that's a fair categorization. I think it's a bit overstating it. I think he looked at one aspect of it in isolation and said, if the government only did that, then that might be an appropriate conclusion. But the truth is, you have to look at the entire suite of things that we are doing for Canadian families, and all Canadian families benefit from the tax relief packages that we've put forward. The Canadian family tax cuts that we've put out there benefit all kids, all families, and will continue to do so. Whether it's the universal child care benefit, the direct cash support to parents so they can have a little bit more power and money in their pockets to raise their kids as they want, whether it's pension income splitting for seniors or income splitting for families. I mean, all taken together, we've put in place more than $3,400 in tax relief for the average Canadian family since Stephen Harper became Prime Minister, and this is something that Canadians have asked for. We campaigned on it, and we're delivering it in successive budgets, including the budget on April 21st.
Okay, I have to ask you about the Senate. We're hearing more and more examples yet with this audit that's going to come out of absolutely crazy spending by senators of both Liberals and Conservatives. Isn't it time for the government to shut off the money tap to the Red Chamber?
Well, of course, like the audit is really important. I mean, there clearly has to be a measure of accountability in the Senate. We called for the audit. I think it's frankly been overdue for quite some time, and I think we'll wait for the auditor's report and see what measures need to be taken. We have put in some accountability measures. The Senate has, I should say, because they do act independently. And look, this has been a long-standing frustration of me, of you, I think of all Canadians, that this has been an institution that I think for far too long has had its own way with taxpayers' money and not been as transparent or as accountable to Canadians as they should be. And I think the auditor's report will shed a lot of light on what has happened and hopefully give a very clear and firm direction of what way to go in the future, so we can avoid these kinds of irresponsible spending that we've seen from a few senators.
Mr. Moore, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.